We're going to call to order the Finance Committee meeting for March the 21st, 2022. Before we get into tonight's agenda items, we will start out with our invocation. If you'll please stand, followed by our flag salute. Our invocation tonight will be led by Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we come before you as humble as we know how, God, recognizing that we can only depend on the presence of your Holy Spirit for the decisions that we must make. I pray, oh God, that as we go through our agenda on tonight, item by item, Lord, that you will lead us and guide us in accordance to your will, Father, that we may leave from this place knowing that we did our best to depend on you the best we can through our human frailty. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Flag salute. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For tonight's Finance Committee agenda item number 1, please.
Consider approval of Finance Committee minutes of March 7th, 2022, or take other necessary action.
After reviewing the minutes, are there any corrections or additions to our minutes?
For approval?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve our minutes. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hoos.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Item number 1 passes. Item number 2, please.
Consider approval of claims for all city departments February 26, 2022 through March 11, 2022, or take other necessary action.
We have a report from the Purchasing Committee.
Yes, the purchasing committee did meet this afternoon and we approved all claims. I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve our claims list. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hoos.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs. Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Item number 2 passes. Item number 3, please.
Consider approval of resolution, number 2894, authorizing certain modifications to the medical plan benefits under the City of Muskogee Employee Benefit Plan, providing and directing said modifications be incorporated into the plan documents, summary plan descriptions, and benefit summary sheets, as well as approval of resolution number 2895, approving and authorizing execution of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Benefit Program application and required addendums, PBM termination letter, Blue Cross Blue Shield exhibit to the stop-loss coverage policy, Prime Therapeutics required documents, and all other required documents, all to become effective on May 1, 2022, and authorizing the city manager or designee to execute all necessary documents for renewal and implementation purposes or take other necessary action.
Thank you. Ms. Cox?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I have passed out new contracts. Some of those are the same contracts that are in the packet. Some of those are revised. There were some name changes for staff in my office. Additionally, the ASA, which is the Administrative Services Addendum, was not included in the original packet, so I have included that for you this evening. These are changes for our insurance benefits for this next plan year, which is beginning on May the 1st. These resolutions are to be effective for the new plan year to be effective May the 1st as well. The first allows the various benefit changes to be incorporated into our documents. The second authorizes the city manager to execute each of those agreements. This year, the insurance committee and staff are recommending a 10% increase to the employee premiums and also to the city's premiums for medical plan. However, we understand that the increases are sometimes hard to be taken by the employees, so we have decided as well to offer a 2-tier plan this year. One will be a high plan or a buy-up plan, which will have that 10% increase for those employees who want to take that for their dependents that they have on the plan. The other plan, which will be called the base plan or the low plan, will be the same rates that we have today. They will have higher co-pays and higher deductibles. Hopefully we can get some employees who only utilize CareATC, which is our local clinic, the Zero Card and Connect DME, to enroll their dependents on that plan, which in turn will cost them less and also cost us less as a city in claims. We are still self-insured for the medical plan. The dental and the vision plan are both fully insured plans through MetLife. The vision plan, we are recommending a 4% increase from the city side and a 4% increase on the employee side. And for the dental plan, which is also through MetLife, we are recommending a 5% increase to the city side for the funding and a 5% increase to the employee side as well. There are no substantial changes to the benefits this year. We have had a very catastrophic year this last year and the year before, some of it due to COVID, some of it things out of our control. We are in the negative right now for the insurance plan fund balance. We want to try to get back up to about $1 million or so. With this 10% increase, it probably won't get us there if we continue to have catastrophic claims. However, it'll get us more towards that goal. And the only way to do that is to increase those premiums. But again, if we offer that two-tier plan, hopefully the employees will be able to choose wisely which plan is best for them, the lower premium plan or the higher premium plan. This has gone through the insurance committee. The insurance committee unanimously voted to approve this, and staff is also recommending approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Cox?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recognized.
Yes, sir.
I would suggest that since we are just reviewing the new information on tonight and to give council proper opportunity to answer questions, because I'm certain they're going to get questions during the week about the increase, that we move this to Monday so that we can have more time to review.
Sounds good. Any suggestions to that?
I'd also like to know, I know that we received some federal funding and we kind of did some changes to give the employees a raise. Can we also take a look at that and see if there's anywhere else where we can maybe move some of that money around to see if it kind of lessens that blow a little bit more?
To my understanding, it's all been allocated. There
Yes.
is an additional 724, Jennifer, I might have that number incorrect, $1,000 that is going to be funded into the plan come October this next year. However, with that additional funding, we're still going to have a deficit if we don't increase those premiums.
So, Mr. Tucker, do I need a formal motion to move, or what?
Yes, you'll need a motion to move this forward without recommendation.
To Monday night?
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move this agenda item to the regular council agenda for Monday. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Item number 3 will be moved. And with that being said, that is our final item for our finance committee.
Welcome to tonight's Public Works Committee meeting of March 21st, 2022. Item number 1, please.
Consider approval of Public Works Committee minutes of March 7th, 2022, or take other necessary action.
Are there any corrections, or do we have a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 2.
Hold a public hearing and take action on the approval of ordinance number 4156A to rezone property located at 3811 Boston Street, being more particularly described in the ordinance from R5 mobile home to C1 local commercial, and if approved, authorize staff to revise the official zoning map of the city to reflect said change or take other necessary action.
Mr. Hazelton?
Alrighty, good evening, council members. We have an application from Mr. Travis Reeves, who's the owner and applicant to rezone property at 3811 Boston Avenue from the R5 mobile home to the C1 local commercial. This request is so that Mr. Reeves can build a shop for which he can do hobby work. There will be no items sold, and there will be no one other than Mr. Reeves visiting the property for any sort of commercial activity. The reason that we need to change this from R5 to C1 is that a secondary use such as a shop is not permitted without a primary use on the property, which in the R5 is a mobile home. So you can see it on your screen a little better there, but the red asterisk is the property in question, and then it is a spot of R5 zoning. The staff is recommending approval to the C1. This was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission this morning.
Move for approval? Or wait.
You have to close the public
We
hearing.
gotta close the public hearing.
Move for approval?
We have a motion. And a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
The motion passes. Item number 3.
Discuss and take action on a plan for engaging the services of a third-party contractor to aid the city in code and parking enforcement.
Mayor Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask that this item be on the agenda on tonight because as we try to move our city forward, we have a lot to do and not enough staff to do it, particularly in the area of code enforcement and parking enforcement. This is also the Azalea Cleanup Week. I think it's a perfect time to direct staff at this time to engage in the services of third-party contracting to be able to assist in those areas, in particular those areas of code enforcement and parking enforcement. And that would be my motion.
Motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 4.
Consider approval to authorize the mayor to prepare and submit a letter of support for the Muskogee City County Port Authority's ARPA application within the city of Muskogee and Muskogee County, or take other necessary action.
Ms. Sweetie.
Good evening. As you know, the city prepared applications for the State Rescue Fund portal in the past few weeks, and the port has also prepared an application for their levee project. They are requesting that the city would equally draft a letter of support as they have done for our projects within this area. And we are not pledging any financial support. We would just like to show support in writing for their state grant application as a community partner. Happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 5.
Consider approval to award bids for mowing projects within the city of Muskogee, or take other necessary action.
Mr. Stewart.
Madam Chairman and committee, what we have before you are the mowing bids, and I'll briefly run through these. First of all, I'm going to give you the total. The total for the entire mowing project is $400,000. What we have bid and have done in the past is $150,000 per year. We've done that for many different years, and that's the mowing of the turnpike and the drainage structures. So the $400,000 sounds awfully large on this contract, but our 150 was going to go up anyway because of the cost of gas and the difficulty to get employees. So really what we have before you is only about $100,000 in new mowings. And if you'll remember in our council communication lunches, that's kind of what we were targeting. But this will get one of the bids to Lawn Star mowing, and those are all new that are from Lawn Star. That's mowing the Broadway parking lot, which is over on G&F off of Broadway. That will get the Peak Boulevard Center Medium done, and that's by Lawn Star. And that will get the Haskell Boulevard Medium cut, and also that area over on 34th Street by the Health Department. And Councilor Van, I did intend to improve that area with a concrete channel or some piping, so maybe we won't have to mow it all year, but for now we're going to go ahead and hire a contractor to do it. So there's also two on here next by Avery Lawn Care, and those were currently being mowed by a contractor, and those are the Main Street mediums, and that's from where our recycling center is out to Shawnee, and the Highway 69 medium And by the way, that's quite a few cuttings on that Highway 69 medium. That's 38. That price looked awfully large to me till I looked at how many times it's being cut and where they have to be and the safety aspect of that area that they're going to have to take in. The next one is D&G Ag Service. D&G Ag Service is the contractor that's always mowed the turnpikes, and they're going to pick up Peak Boulevard, and they're going to mow it from Highway 69 all the way through to Queens. And so if you go from the west to the east, it'd be from Highway 69 to Queens, and then they're going to skip over to the turnpike and mow back to Cherokee. So that's a big area that we have been mowing that's going to come off of us. That's going to increase our in-town mowing tremendously. They're also going to pick up South Main Street between Madison and Smith Ferry, and really, if you'll think about it, that's West-South Side Boulevard where the traffic light is, all the way out to Smith Ferry Road. And that's currently being mowed by the state, and that's only being mowed 3 times a year, and this is going to get at least 7 cuttings. So it's over double the mowing that has been going. The rest of these are contract bids by Grass Monkey. When you see base bids on those drainage easements, those are the easements that we have done year after year after year, and Grass Monkey's been cut quite a few of them and doing a really good job. They're all over town. If need be, Jason can come up here and go through the list with you if you'd like. But we do recommend approval. Again, this is a $400,000 project. We have been doing budgeting, and this is something that can be budgeted. It is in-house in our budget, and I've talked with Ms. Sweezy where we might need to reach out and get that extra $100,000. So it is in budget. Do recommend approval. The contracts all check, and we think this is a great thing for our department. It will definitely assist us in making the mowing better around town. It'll bring our forces in, get our concentration better. So recommend approval.
Move for approval?
Second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be recognized.
Yes.
Down on Main Street, Mike, if I remember this winter, didn't they uncover the sidewalk in that center lane? Or did I look at it wrong? You know, right on North Main?
You're talking about no. What we did was we went out there and we cut the edges.
Oh, okay.
And we cut those edges down because I don't know if you remember, but they were getting several inches high, and it was getting harder and harder to edge. So we periodically in my career here, every 4 or 5 years, have gone in there and cut that down. You won't notice that in another 30 days because the grass will come up and it'll be easier to edge. Looks kind of bad now, but it's going to be a lot better.
I'll turn the floor back over to Ms. Sherman.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 6. We didn't have to vote, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of us. I'm not going to.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Item number 6.
Consider approval of the appointment of Gary Wright to the Airport Board to serve a 4-year term beginning March 1, 2022 and ending February 28, 2026, filling the expired term of Tyler Hammonds or take other necessary action.
Councilor Morgan.
Yes, I want to appoint Gary Wright to the airport board. He does have his pilot license. I do believe he'd be a great asset out there. I move for approval.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes.
That concludes our agenda. Now we will go into our special call meeting.
Let me say good evening to everyone. We will now call to order the special call meeting for the Muskogee City Council for March 21st, 2022. Roll call.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Here.
Ivory Van.
Here.
Jamie Stout.
Here.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Here.
Alex Reynolds. Stephanie Morgan.
Here.
Tracy McGee.
Here.
Tracy Hous.
Item number 1.
Hold a public hearing and take action on the approval of ordinance number 4152A to rezone property addressed as 3701 South York Street, being more particularly described in the ordinance from R1, single-family residential, to RA, agricultural residential, and if approved, authorize staff to revise the official zoning map of the city to reflect said change or take other necessary action.
We will now open the public hearing. Mr. Hazelton.
Good evening. We have an application from Mr. Kurt McClellan to rezone his property at 3701 South York from R1 to RA to allow for agricultural use on his property. You've heard this particular application multiple times. It was denied from Planning Commission and Public Works on February 7th, and then was tabled on February 14th, 28th, and March 14th to this evening. What you're looking at right now is the zoning in the area. Mr. McClellan's property is on the bottom right, showing that it is R1 to the north and R1 to the south. There is one section of RA which is denoted by the gold there, and that's about a half a mile south of the subject property. Here is the zoning directly adjacent to the property. To the east is outside of city limits. Like I said, south residential. That bottom right, residential agriculture, is the gold that you saw on the previous slide. Staff does recommend approval, and would like to note that there have been questions raised about the impacts on adjacent property values, and that any sort of educational or academic studies on the impacts of Ag 2 property values is done at a what's called an AFO, which is animal feeding operation, which it's 1,000 head of livestock or 9,000 chickens before any sort of meaningful change on property values is realized. The other thing that we wanted to note was that, as stated in previous meetings, that the infrastructure available at this property does not allow for further development, and that an agricultural use does make the most amount of sense in staff's eyes. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
We have several residents having signed up to speak to these items. We'll hear from them first. The first being Kurt McClellan. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone, give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name's Kurt McClellan. I live at 3701 South York, and I've had most of you guys out to the house to take a look at our operation. And what Scott just mentioned was, the concentrated feeding operations. We're 10 times less than that with what we're proposing. Okay, all we want to do is have about 80 chickens in a chicken tractor. I'm sorry, 72 chickens in a chicken tractor, and that's it. We don't want to have 25 cows and all of these different things. We want to raise what our family can consume in a year, period. And any speaking about anything else is just folly. It doesn't exist, okay? And before I forget, because I get going about 100 miles an hour and I always forget what I want to say, I spoke to the city attorney, and I proposed that we have a buffer zone. If everybody's freaked out about being able to see the cows and whatnot, what if we just took 100 foot away from the road on the north and my west boundary and said, okay, no residential agriculture on that 100 foot. Let's just do it on the rest of the property. That way, nobody's got to smell it. Nobody's really going to see it, because it's going to be so far away from those property lines. I think that's a great compromise for anybody who wants to compromise. I told several of you guys that I did a exhaustive search online trying to find impacts on small farm, micro farm operations on residential property values, and it just doesn't exist because there is no impact on residential property values. Now, there's a lot of fear, but you figure in this world today of, with the internet and everything else, if there was a study, if there was an impact on property values, they would be online. You would be able to read that study and you'd be able to compromise. And I did have one more thing, because it came up a couple times. And I don't know where my picture is, but on the picture that I submitted, it showed in red where we propose to have the cattle and where we propose to have the chickens. Is there any way we could pull that up so the council could see it? No? Okay. Okay, but they're basically in the front of our house, we have a 600-foot driveway that goes all the way down, and we propose to put the cows right there so we can feed them water them out of, we have a spigot out there on the corner and we will water them there. And then secondly, if we did get into trouble with water, we have the pond right there that we can pump water to the animals right there and feed them and let them drink that water. We don't want them on the other side because it could contaminate the pond. And we have some really nice bass in there. We don't want that. We don't want that in there, you know. So that's why we're proposing to doing it what we said. And there should be a picture for you guys to look at. It's all outlined in red where we wanted to put the stuff, okay? And, you know, I appreciate you guys. I mean, I've had all of you out, most of you out. And, you know, I didn't realize that you guys work for free on this stuff, you know. And I want to thank you guys for you putting up with all of this stuff and you're working for free. That just blows my mind, you know, but that's a servant's heart, you know, and I appreciate you guys, and there's not going to be any hard feelings one way or the other one, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I'm gonna treat these people from the Woodlands just like, you know, there's no animosity on my part, okay? We're Christian people. We love everybody. We want to get along with everybody, and we're not gonna cause any trouble. I think our idea of having that buffer zone is a really great idea if everybody would consider it, you know. And I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
There's a picture.
Oh, there it is. Can you see it? This is the cow paddock right here. It's 297 feet, 292 feet from the fence over here, and the cows would stay right there in the front, right here. And then the chicken paddock is right here, right? And of course, if the amendment goes through and the buffer zone comes in, that would have to be adjusted some on that western boundary. But that's no problem. We have enough ground there to be able to do what we want to do, you know? So, any questions?
Do we have any questions for Mr. McClellan from the council? Thank you, Mr. McClellan. We may call you back, but
Okay.
thank you. The next person having signed up to speak to us tonight is Jeremy McClellan. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Jeremy McClelland. I reside at 3701 South York. First off, I'd like to apologize on behalf of my family if we've said anything that's offended any of our neighbors. That was never our intentions. I've gone through a range of emotions in this whole process, and a little bit angry, a little bit depressed at points. I don't want to respond in those emotions. That's why I'm following these notes. As a follower of Jesus Christ, I try to live my life according to his teachings, one of which is to love my neighbor. So I've really tried to understand where our neighbors are coming from. The only thing I can come up with is that they either don't understand what we're trying to do or they don't believe us when we say what we're trying to do. I think if they did, I don't think anyone would oppose it. My appeal to everyone is to look at our history. When we purchased the property in May of 2021, it was way overgrown. The grass was way high. It was basically out of maintenance. It needed to be maintained. And we've started to do that. We've cut the grass every time that it needed to be cut. We've kept it down. We've painted. We have plans to do more painting on the fence, on the exterior. We fixed pipes that were busted when we bought the property. We've done a lot of things to improve the property, and that's our plan, to continue to improve it. I know our neighbors are concerned that we will disparage their property values, but we cannot do that without hurting our own property values. We're not rich people, so why would we do that? You know, it doesn't even make any sense. They're concerned about ruining the beauty of the roadway leading to their subdivision. We can't destroy the beauty of that without destroying our beauty of our own property. One of the reasons we purchased this property is because we think it's a beautiful piece of property. That's why we bought it. So that's never been in any of our plans to do that. So I want to make clear what we want to do. We want to raise chickens for meat. The limits have put us at a total of 84 birds. They will be enclosed in what's called a chicken tractor that we would move to fresh grass every day. We have 8 hens right now for eggs. We finally slaughtered the roosters. We had some nice weather finally, and we got rid of them. They were there by accident to begin with from Tractor Supply, but we got rid of those. Our family can probably eat about 120 to 160 chickens a year, so that's 1 to 1.5 rounds of raising chickens. They take about 8 weeks to raise and process. So for 16 weeks max. In summer, spring, and fall, we would have the birds, the meat birds. None of them will be roosters. 2 cows will be on the front of the property facing York, closest to our pond, as my dad mentioned earlier. That's all we want to do. We don't want to move. Our children love the school. My wife and I have an autistic son. It's very difficult for him to readjust. Nevertheless, we're looking for properties now. We're going to look at other houses because it's, if we don't get this, we're not staying. So we're good neighbors. We want to keep being good neighbors. So thank you for your consideration.
Do we have any questions for Mr. McClellan from the council? If not, our next person having signed up to speak to this item is Mike Calavan. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes.
I'm Mike Calavan. I live at 3700 South York Street, which is directly across York Street from the McClellan property. And I would say that if something occurred on that property that was detrimental, I would probably be more affected than anyone in this room, since it's right out my front door. I'm here tonight not because this affects me, because I am in the county. I do have some cows over there through the summer. It helps keep my mowing costs down, and they're very tasty when fall comes. But I'm here tonight because I think that there's always a silent majority in an issue like this that doesn't, if they have no objection, they don't say anything. And so I'm here in support of Mr. McClellan's request for rezoning. I think a reasonable person would look at that property and say that is a proper use for that property. And I really think that we as a people would be better off if more of us were trying to be self-sufficient and provide our needs in the way that they are. The second reason I'm here is because I think the fact that we are here is an indication of Mr. McClellan's character. I believe that most people would have just put their chickens out there and put their livestock out there and never said anything to anybody, and probably nobody would have ever said anything about it because it looks like a reasonable use for that property. So I'm here to support the McClellans because I think they're trying to do what's right. They're doing it in the right and proper way, and I think that you should approve this request.
Thank you, Mr. Calavan. Do we have any questions for Mr. Calavan from the council on tonight? Thank you. Next person having signed up to speak to this agenda item is Bob Coburn. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Mayor and council, thank you. I'm Bob Coburn, live at 121 North Country Club Road. I am an agricultural grandparent and feel strongly about the economic impact agriculture has on our community and on our county, as well as the wholesome impact that agriculture has on the lives of young people in our community. I know many of the people that live in the Woodlands and many of them that are here tonight. I met Kurt McClellan excuse me, not long after he moved to Muskogee, and Kurt had shared his desires and wishes for the property that he has. And I've got some questions that I want to ask, and maybe I'll ask him and answer them as well. Does Kurt McClellan's current zoning request, meet zoning regulations? Yes. Is the request consistent with the zoning map? Yes. According to Scott Hazelton, Planning Director for the City of Muskogee, it complies completely. How can you as a counselor let public opinion outweigh the zoning regulation and future land use map that were established by public meetings, previous councils, and city staff? Does public opinion change the zoning requirements? No. There's a procedure for changing the zoning regulations that's already in place. If the zoning requirements are not acceptable, then change the zoning requirements. Be consistent with the decisions that you make based on the zoning requirements not on public opinion. I've been told that the Bearden's previous zoning request was denied, so therefore it must deny Mr. McClellan's request as well. If the Bearden's zoning request was denied based on public opinion and actually met the zoning requirements, then in proactive manner, as a city, reach out to them and fix it. Two wrongs don't make a right. I feel like there is a middle ground, a compromise, if you will, that both groups could agree on and move forward without conflict regarding the residential agricultural zoning request that meets the zoning regulations that are already in place. Please find that compromise over rejecting this request. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Colburn on tonight? Thank you, Mr. Colburn. The next person having signed up to speak to us tonight is Tammy Richter. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tammy Richter. My husband is Dr. Roger Richter. We live at 1901 East Woodland Circle. I am speaking this evening in opposition to the RA rezoning of 3701 South York Street. Some of my fellow neighbors are here. Others who also oppose the rezoning were not able to attend for various reasons, but in their absence, I have brought, and you guys should have a digital copy and a physical copy as well, of a petition that we took through our neighborhood. We have 16 families within the neighborhood that have signed this petition in opposition of the RA rezoning. So I'm here this evening to share the reservations that myself, my family, and others on the petition have that we would like the council to consider prior to making your decision. One concern is that we do fear that the current and ongoing blatant disregard of multiple city ordinances that are being violated will continue in the future, even if giving a new set of rules to go by. So while the landowner has expressed how many animals they intend on having, we are not confident that they will stay within the city limitations, as they have already been violating the current rules and regulations. We are not trying to dictate what someone can and cannot do on their property. We're simply just asking the city to continue to uphold the rules and regulations that you guys have already set. A big portion of the land in question runs along the entrance to our private, gated, clean, quiet neighborhood. We fear that the rezoning will compromise that beautiful and peaceful entrance, and we are concerned that this will decrease our property value. Talking to real estate people in the area, they have said if you can hear it, see it, smell it, it will detract from our homes and the value. While we support the autonomy of a private landowner, we feel allowing the rezoning will benefit his family while causing an undue burden to multiple homeowners in our neighborhood. Our final concern is the potential negative ecological impact the runoff from this farm could have on our land and local environment. There's not a lot of studies that are done on the smaller side of things. I know there are a lot on the larger side, but that area of South York Street, you guys know it poorly drains. It goes into Cootie Creek. It comes right across our drive. We are concerned that the waste running off from the farm will drain into our entrance, feed into Cootie Creek, and potentially pollute the creek, our neighborhood, even his land, York Street, and the surrounding land. Thank you for your time, and myself and the other neighbors, on the petition, we are asking that you decline the request to rezone the property. Thank you.
Does the council have any questions for Ms. Richter?
Yes, Ms. Richter. Ms. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Yes, Mr. Van.
Ms. Richter, how many residents, how many houses is in Woodland?
So there are 27 homes in the neighborhood that are already established or are in the process of building that should be living there within the year, given the circumstances of building right now.
So altogether you have 27 homes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Turn the floor back over to you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Van. Are there any other questions for Ms. Richter? Thank you, Ms. Richter.
Thank you.
The next person that has signed to speak to us tonight is Rachel Neighbors. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Rachel Neighbors. I live at 1808 East Woodland Circle. I am before you today opposing the RA zoning of the property located at 3701 South York. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization here in Muskogee. I've worked in Muskogee for 20 years. However, I only moved within the Muskogee city limits 6 years ago. Prior to that, I lived on 30 acres in an agriculture area south of Muskogee. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Webbers Falls, Oklahoma, but you can't get much more country and agriculture than that area. My husband and I sold the home that we raised our children in for 18 years in order to get out of the country and away from the sight, sound, and smells of farm animals. We lived in a rent house in Grandview for 2 years, waiting on the opportunity to purchase our forever home. We had done our research and narrowed our search to properties that were within the city limits, yet gave us the peace and setting that we desired. Since the purchase of our home in the Woodlands, we have made significant investments into the property, adding outdoor living space to include a pool, hot tub, covered patio, and outdoor kitchen. These were all our dream renovations that we did not want to put on our former home due to it being in an agricultural setting, and why we chose to purchase a home in the city limits. My backyard directly faces Mr. McClendon's property. At this time, Mr. McClendon is breaking city ordinances by having chickens and roosters in a residential area. We are unable to enjoy our investment without the disturbance of his animals. Until recently, we were woken up between 5 and 5:30 every morning with his roosters crowing. Mr. McClendon has openly stated he is in violation of city ordinances. We can only reasonably infer that this blatant disregard for our city ordinances will continue in the future. If the RA is granted, he will do what he wants, and his actions have proven this. He has stated numerous times to the homeowners and to the council that he will have a rooster for his chickens to fertilize their eggs to produce more chickens, again, breaking city ordinances. Additionally, Mr. McClendon currently owns a dog that is allowed to roam our neighborhood. It has destroyed my flower beds as well as dug numerous holes in my yard. If he cannot keep his dog under control, how can we know that he will keep his other farm animals under control? Mr. McClendon claims that his chickens currently stay in a coop. They do not. I have 2 pictures, one showing his dog in my yard and the other showing the chickens out of their coop. These were sent to the city council members last week via email. Mr. McClendon reported plans for his property have changed 4 times over the last 6 weeks in order to sway votes, as recently as today. We have spoken with several real estate agents who have agreed that having farm animals this close to our home will absolutely decrease the value of our home. We should not have to suffer because Mr. McClendon did not do his due diligence and buy a property that was already zoned RA or A1. He has mentioned several times to the council that he could not find any other land to buy in this area. Again, me and my family had to live in a rent home for 2 years waiting for our forever property. Again, why should we be punished because he chose not to do that? We feel the rezoning will benefit his family while causing undue burdens to multiple homeowners in our neighborhood. The petition you have in front of you shows the majority of our neighborhood opposes the rezoning. As city council members, it's your duty to protect the interest of the community, not just one individual. And I hope your vote tonight reflects your willingness to do just that. Thank you.
Does the council have any questions for Ms. Neighbors? Thank you, Ms. Neighbors. The next person having signed to speak up to us tonight is Tina Nguyen. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes. That's fine. I understand you're going to help.
I am going to help her.
Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tina Nguyen. The first thing I want to say hello to Mayor Mallon and all the lady and gentlemen here, and thank you for working so hard for us. My English is not good, and I don't speak in the front people much, so I'm nervous. But I have to speak today just because my house is next to him. Like we just one fence. We like he another fence of my house. So I think about his case. He's a very nice neighborhood. We get along pretty good. But I think about his case. Want to turn his land to the farmland. And it make me couldn't sleep, because You know, I work hard, and this is the first time I can purchase a house. So I think I will live there forever for my retire. And if he can get his land turned to the farm, and my house he can do whatever he wants for long term in the future. He can raise any more he wants, and how many. We cannot control him. We cannot come over and count how many he raised, like he said. And the first thing I think is he will affect the entrance of the neighborhood. It makes the whole neighborhood down value, and it not looks nice. It smell bad. The second is it really bother my house, because if I live by his farm, then I cannot have fresh air anymore. After I go home from work to try to relax, then I cannot walk around the house to do garden or the backyard because it's gonna smell bad. So I cannot relax. And also than that, my bedroom is next close to his fence too. So I don't think I can sleep with the smell, and I can't even open my door. So it's really give me a really bad version in the future. And I don't think my family can handle that. Other than that, if I cannot handle that, if I want to sell my property and nobody want to buy my property, because if they come and they see that air fresh like that, they won't buy my house too. So I know I hurt your feeling, but please do not let him change. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Do you have any questions for Ms. Nguyen on tonight? Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. The next person having signed to speak to this item is Adam Garner. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you will have 5 minutes.
Mayor Coleman, Deputy Mayor Reed, council members, my name's Adam Garner. I live at 1913 East Woodland Circle. I'd like to start, no one is more for personal freedom than me. I spent 20 years defending that. However, those only go until your freedom infringes upon someone else's. To address our neighbor at 3800 York, I usually am that silent majority too, but felt I must speak up. I absolutely want Mr. McClellan to start however big of a chicken farm he wants and live a happy, fruitful life. However, I don't want it in my backyard or neighborhood. We moved into our community right on the edge of the city so that we could be just far enough out to not be in the city and within limits so that we wouldn't be subject to the farm life. I'm not opposed to anyone raising a couple of chickens for themselves, but I don't want to live right next to the stink of as many as they plan. I have passed by and flown over many chicken farms, and the smell they carry goes far and wide. Animals, dead animals, or their remains stink, period. We chose a nice neighborhood to raise our kids in the city so that we wouldn't be next to that. A couple more reasons of why I asked to deny the request to rezone. The first is he has already proven they're unwilling to follow the established ordinances by their actions and comments a couple meetings ago when he said something to the effect of, I know I'm breaking the rules, fine me or whatever you want. He clearly has a lack of regard for existing rules, and we expect they won't be followed based on his previous and current behavior and statements. The next is many of our neighbors have called code enforcement and zoning trying to get someone from the city to enforce what's already on the books. So far, they met with resistance and zero action. I ask and now see that obviously that is moving forward. It seems that a different discussion be brought up for the council to figure out who's actually in charge of enforcing those code violations in the city, because I think there's a bigger problem throughout the Muskogee area. So with those two things, we know there's a lack of enforcement action, and based on the previous experiences of the applicant, he appears to have a lack of motivation to follow any of the rules that are already on the books, and we ask for those two reasons it be denied. Finally, on the City of Muskogee webpage under zoning, the comprehensive plan and future land use map adopted in June of 2012 on page 42 under residential goal 1, objective number 7, specifically talks about protecting residential areas from the adverse impacts of adjacent incompatible land uses. And I realize this is still a residential, but it's trying to change it to the agriculture. But I believe that operating a chicken farm, whether it's 20 chickens or 1,000 chickens near a neighborhood, is one of the circumstances where the residential areas should be protected, especially since we're living in one of the nicer neighborhoods on the south side of Muskogee. If we wanted to live by and smell a chicken farm, we would have bought near a chicken farm. There are many acres for sale in the surrounding area that wouldn't have the restrictions that prohibit what he wants to do. I hope he's able to find somewhere to do that, but I must ask that you protect our residential area and deny the request to change his, and pending any of your questions.
Do we have any questions from the council for Mr. Garner? Thank you, Mr. Garner.
Sir.
The next resident having signed to speak up to us tonight is Michelle Ocean. I'm going to ask that you come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Michelle Olshan. I live at 1812 East Woodland Circle in the Woodlands. I'm here again this evening as an individual homeowner to oppose the rezoning of 3701 South York. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself and my husband, Dr. Andrew Olshan. First, I'd like to thank those of you that came out to see the Woodlands. We really appreciated you taking the time to come see the McClellan's property and theirs, and how we all mesh together back there on that side of town. My argument is still that I am against this rezoning. The homeowners, many of you came tonight. Unfortunately, we couldn't have a lot because there were sports activities and the like and for commitments and stuff, but we have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy, and we keep coming up here to you week after week, begging you to listen to us that we really are trying to preserve what the Woodlands looks like. It's been there for 20 years. We haven't had any issues with any of the other neighbors around. Yes, we have county across the street. Yes, across the street there are cows, but they're not in our front yard. The amount of time and energy that we have invested in this development, where so many people have moved from outside into the city because they want to live in a neighborhood that is clean, that is beautiful. The entrance is park-like. We have people that come to the entrance all the time to take pictures because it is beautiful. We just are hoping that somebody will listen to us. With regards to Mr. McClellan's comment the last city council meeting, yes, we know that our entrance does need a little bit of work and that our white fence does need some love. We do. Spring cleanup is starting in a couple of weeks, so we do apologize that our fence is not up to par. But with that being said, a major reason why I oppose any type of farming adjacent to our entrance is because of the flooding that happens frequently throughout the year. In case in point, flooding today. Front of the entrance is flooded. We can still get through it, but everything from the McClellans is flowing right down into our driveway today. And I do have pictures. I couldn't get them up on the presentation today because it had just stopped raining. But it doesn't matter how much of a distance that the farm animals will be from the Woodlands property. Because of the grading of the McClellan's property, everything just flows right downhill. It's huge, and the grading at the bottom between the Woodlands and the McClellans, that area right there, it just sits. Water just sits there for days and weeks sometimes. I've collected some pictures and put them in a PowerPoint, if we could get that. Okay, so this is the front of our development. I have to stress, this was not taken in 2019 during the Great Flood. This is our typical, happens multiple times a year situation that we've got going out in the Woodlands. Everybody knows that York Street floods, but what you might not know is that it floods right back into the front of our development. So you can see that white fence that divides the McClellan's property and our property. So this is our driveway, our white fence, and McClellan's. Now the white fence is this high. This typically happens at least once a year. That water's that high. So down up to here, I don't know, I'm really poor with math, but however high this is when I'm out there in my boots taking pictures, that's how high the water is. That was taken about 3 or 4 years ago, and it took weeks for that to drain back into the Arkansas. So the next picture that I have, this is a different time of season. It happens, it's not like spring or summer rains. This is winter. This is Cootie Creek, and this is what it looks like quite frequently when we get high rains. It's actually almost up to the banks tonight when I left to come here to the meeting. So the water just floods and floods down there. So I understand that Mr. McClellan has said that he's going to keep the farm animals on the other side of his property. However, he's changed his story each time he comes up here. They're going to be here, they're going to be there, they're going to be in 40 by 40 pens. You know, I don't want to mow the grass, so now they're going to be free-flowing. You know, it does get hot in the summertime, and with the animals out there in the hot and the sun, there's no way that is going to be healthy. So Chrissy's going to bring them back down underneath the trees, which this right here, which all floods, so gets all mucky and murky. The next picture that we have, yeah, that's just, you know, this is the summertime, what it looks like when it rains. And these are just normal rains that we get.
Ms. Ocean, I'm sorry, but your 5 minutes is up.
My 5 minutes are up. I'm so
Mr.
sorry.
Mayor, I would like to, because of the nature of the pictures, I know we've had a long night tonight, but I would like to make a motion that we extend her time by 3 minutes.
Second. We have a second.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I just got very
No
passionate
problem.
about this. Okay.
Roll call.
So as you
1
can
minute,
see.
Ms. Ocean.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee. Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds. Evelyn Hibbs. Jamie Stout. Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, Ms. Ocean, you may continue. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, let me go. So the other pictures that are here in the presentation are just, you know, different times of year, multiple different years. This was actually a couple of weeks ago. So this is right at our fence. You can see how muddy it is from the rain. But that is just water just laying there after a couple of days after it rains. So the drainage from the properties is very poor. And, you know, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it is what it is. We chose to live out here. But I just would like to express that we do love where we live. And we did have an opportunity to live in a different part of Oklahoma, but we chose to stay in Muskogee. My husband's been out here for 20 years, and we've invested a tremendous amount into this community. And we just hope that you'll take into consideration that does the wants of one outweigh those of the many? Thank you for your time.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Ocean on tonight?
Mr.
From the
Member, I'll be
council?
recognized.
Yes, Mr. Van.
Ms. Ocean, can you stand there for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Can you pull those pictures back up, please?
Sure. I guess. Pictures. Ta-da! Pictures. There you go, yes. Where would you
Okay.
like to go, sir?
Okay, that's the beautiful part of it right there. There's nothing flooding right there. No, that white fence, is that y'all's, the Woodlands?
Yes, that's the Woodlands white fence, yes.
That's the Woodlands, and that's your property up
On
there?
the other side is where the McClellans,
Okay.
on the other side, far.
Okay, go to the picture we've got all the water. Now, where's that located? No, I know where that one
That's
is.
the front, that's the front of
Okay.
the development, so.
Same fence.
Right.
So it's the same fence.
Right,
There's the
okay.
white fence, and this is the actual driveway.
Right.
And this is the creek.
Okay. When I was out there, one thing I did notice, that, you know, don't get me wrong, please don't take this the wrong way,
Okay.
but flooding is a big problem. That's a real big problem. How many times does it flood like this? You said once a year?
At least once, twice a year, whenever we get a hard rain. If York Street's flooded,
Mhm.
we're flooded.
And I noticed the creek
Mhm.
where you live. I didn't get to go in back of your property, but I noticed on down, it's eroding.
Oh, yes, sir, it is.
It's eroding. That's the problem.
Yes,
And that's
it
the
is.
problem that I think, Mr. Stewart, would you tell me?
We have talked. Yeah,
who
we're
takes-
on it.
Who takes care of the creek?
It's the Corps of Engineers.
Corps of Engineers. Have you got a hold of the Corps of
Yes,
Engineers?
we've been talking with them and with the city about, because we only have about 6 feet left from the bank of Cootie Creek to that street, to our road right there, before Cootie Creek collapses and takes that road. So yes, we are working with the city to get some riprap put down there to reinforce the creek. I mean, over the years with all of the rains and
Mhm.
what happened in 2019, it has completely destroyed Cootie Creek.
I know this to me, seems like, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to add to that because that is a private road.
Yes.
And we are working with them to get an access agreement so that we can do a partnership with them.
Yep.
That will run through the city manager and the city attorney's office. So it's not a city road, it's a private road, but we're working to help them with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure you understood that.
Yes.
Okay, because that problem out there definitely needs to be fixed.
Oh, absolutely,
One-
sir.
one
Oh, I
thing-
know.
One thing about y'all though, I noticed also while I was out there, it's different than Eagle Crest. When you go on 40th Street on Eagle Crest,
Mm-hmm.
and when Eagle Crest flooded like this, there's no escape.
Right.
They're trapped. Y'all have an escape. That gate.
If you know the combination.
If you know the
If you know the combination, sir.
And me and other councilmen, I want to thank the mayor and I want to thank all the councilmen for going out there and looking at this in the Woodlands. I really do. But I'm just curious, where does that road go? Does it go to Gulick Street? We were trying to figure that out.
It goes to
It goes
Gulick,
Gulick.
yes. It goes through the development that's behind us called the farm. And there is a gate, they're a gated community as well, the farm. It's the same builders. And there is a gate that is locked that is between the Woodlands and, it's locked with a chain link fence between the Woodlands and the farm. And you have to know what the code is.
Every neighbor in your community, you need to put this on your to-do list. Every neighbor in your community need to know that code to get out of there.
We post it.
Do you?
Oh, yes.
Everybody
Yes, sir.
knows.
On the Woodlands, yes, on our Facebook page. Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, I'll just.
But you know what? Sometimes that there are people coming down, you know, York Street and they get trapped right there and they turn around and they need to get on the other side. We'll come through the farm and not realize that they can't get anywhere because the gate's locked.
And I'm gonna show you one more thing I noticed while I was out there. This is one problem on y'all side. But over where the McCullens live, and also the neighbors up on the hill, going up y'all's private road, you have another problem. You know what that problem is?
What, sir?
In case you didn't know, when your grass gets so high here in the city limits, even out there where you at, when it gets 12 inches high, you're violating our ordinance.
Absolutely.
Those people that own that property that'd be to the south of y'all, that'd be the south, yeah, that'd be the south, going back south of the McCullens.
Okay.
That'd be south of them. That grass is growing up so high, that should have been, I asked them, did they bail that? Okay, they said they bailed that once, maybe twice. Generally, you can get 3 cuttings out of that.
Yeah.
But the way it is right now, when it's dry, somebody could go out there and put a match, and all your $400,000 homes are gone.
Sir, we actually did have a fire out there about 4 years ago that took down 4 of our neighbors' fences. It was huge. And Muskogee Fire Department came out and they were amazing. But yeah, we do know. And it's from people burning that are not supposed to be burning at that certain time. But I can tell you, sir, that our grass out front is cut because we pay $15,000 a year just to cut the front of that development. So it is a huge expense that to keep that park-like structure.
Let me say to Ms. Ocean and to the council, our discussion period has expired. If it's the pleasure of the council to extend it, fine, but if not, then we need to move on. Council? Thank you, Ms. Ocean.
Okay.
Do you want it?
I'm asking the council, this is the council time to have the discussion. We want to extend our own time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was just.
Let's make a motion to extend our time 3 minutes, and then that council 3, 5, 11. What are we talking? 3. That'd be my motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds. Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds, your hand was up.
The farm behind you,
Yes,
what is their agricultural zoning?
they're residential.
Their residential, agricultural residential?
Residential.
Residential.
Just straight residential, yes. They were from the same builder as the Woodlands, but our covenants in the Woodlands are much more strict than theirs are. We have a lot more regulations and rules that we have to follow as homeowners than the farm residents do.
Other questions? While we have time left?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few questions before we close the public hearing, and it may require some of the speakers to return. I'll start with my questions to the staff, if they can answer these questions. Approximately when was the Woodlands annexed into the city?
2004.
They were annexed into the city approximately 2004. So am I to assume that prior to annexation, that cattle was allowed in that area, in that general area?
I can't answer that. It was county, though.
I'm assuming if it's county, Mr. Tucker's nodding his head.
Yes.
Yes. How old is the current future land use map?
It was finalized June 4th of 2012.
2012, and we're required by state law to do it every 10 years. And so it is time for us to update the future land use map. The reason why I'm asking that question is because I think that what the council is going to have to consider well beyond tonight when looking at the future land use map is, will we continue to allow cattle and farm area in certain areas near residential, or will we make decisions that say yes or no, up or down, either way in that regard? The exit gate that leads to Gulick that was mentioned, which is locked. Mr. Stewart, even though that's a private road, is that allowable within the city limits? So a private road can be locked. It can be gated. I just want to be sure I understood that correctly. I'm going to ask, while you're there, Mr. Hazelton, under the existing zoning where the McClellan's property is located, what can be there?
Single-family residential.
Okay, so no animals can be there. The way it's zoned right now, no animals can be there.
They can have, like, dogs and cats.
Dogs and cats,
Like
but no
pets.
chickens and roosters,
That is correct.
like
as
we
it's
currently have
zoned.
there now. Okay. I have a question for Mr. McClellan, if he'll come to the microphone.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, Mr.
I had
Hazelton.
some, as far as the flooding and excuse me, flooding and everything goes, there where East Woodlands connects into South York, that is regulatory floodway, which by our ordinance allows no encroachments. I'm certified floodplain manager. It's a national thing, so I'm going to act as our floodplain manager, even though I received my certification when I took the test in Montana. So I'm going to be working on addressing that in the flooding moving forward, but our ordinance allows no encroachments, which includes any fill, construction, anything in the regulatory floodway. So addressing that could be a major issue moving forward, but I've not had time to talk with the state NFIP coordinator to address that. So I would talk to.
We have an engineering report, then we can offset the.
Yeah, if we have that.
Thank you. Let me say to the members of the audience, as I question some of the conversation that's been had, please respect the answers of those people that give them on tonight, because you have your fair share as well. Mr. McClellan?
Yes,
I
sir.
think that a lot of the concern from the residents in terms of a compromise is that if there are chickens already there without a compromise being offered, can they believe that one will be able to be facilitated going forward? So on the question of the number of cows, because I've heard repeatedly from some of those who oppose that say the number of, how many cows are you actually going to have? Or how many cows do you propose having if this were to pass?
2.
You're only proposing to having 2 cows
Yes, sir.
if this were to pass. How many chickens are you proposing to have if this were to pass?
Well, the residential agriculture says we can have 6 hens per, or 6 chickens, 6 poultry per acre, no roosters.
Is that how many you plan to have? 6 hens per acre, or do you
Yes.
plan to have
Yes.
less?
Yes.
6 hens per
See, we
acre.
have, I'm sorry, we have 8 hens right there right now. And the big question is, we're not in compliance. We're waiting for all this to be settled before we start killing our animals, killing what we have there now. We got rid of the roosters because they were not going to be able to be there at all, and the only reason that we've changed every time we've come up here is because we're trying to compromise, we're trying to get along. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
2 cows and 6 hens per acre, no roosters.
No roosters.
That was my question.
Right. No roosters.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Garner, please. This may also be applicable to Ms. Richter and Ms. Neighbors, but I heard Mr. Garner, I believe, say this first. Let's see, I have a question. I think that what I'm getting at, Mr. Garner, some of the other ones who are here, I think that it was you and maybe some of the others who had said they were concerned about the number of. When you say that, does that mean there can be no compromise, or is 2 cows satisfactory?
Once again, and initially, I'm open to compromise, speaking purely for myself. And to be honest, 2 cows, I'm kind of indifferent on. It's the number of chickens. I don't know if you've ever been around chicken farms or flown over chicken farms or anything like that, but they're pretty horrible creatures. And so enough for, I think enough for a family is a lot less than 70 chickens. I don't know what that number is. But definitely, like I say, based purely, I think you already addressed it, on what we've already said of we're already violating multiple codes or ordinances. Purely off of that is my hesitation to allow any, and especially with, once again, no code enforcement to make sure that's actually done. So what is that number? I don't know. I would, if I had to put one on the spot right now, I would say definitely less than 10. But that would be my answer as I sit in front of you right now without any further research or talking to anything else.
Thank you. That's
Sir?
what I want to hear. Let me have Ms. Richter and Ms. Neighbors please come to the microphone. So all I'm attempting to facilitate is there an opportunity for a compromise, or is there not an opportunity for a compromise? I don't know if the 100-foot buffer is going to be enough to sustain if you have unlimited, or whatever the maximum limit of cows is. But if we're talking 2 cows, and I'm going to use Mr. Garner's number, even though it's purely speculative, if we said 2 cows and 10 chickens, is that enough of a compromise?
Could I have Mr. Tucker clarify something for us?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Tucker, in the RA that he's trying to get, does it not state that he can have so many cows per acre?
Yes, that's correct.
So because of the acreage that he has, he can tell us that he's only going to have 2 cows, but he can have up to 26 cattle before code enforcement will do anything. That's also our concern. And then the house has been sold 3 times in 10 years. So if he tells us that he's going to have 2 cows and he sells the property in 5 years, the next homeowner can have 26 cows. I think it's 2 per acre. So he's able to have actually 26 cows on that property. And there's nothing that we can do about it or you can do about it if it's passed.
Mr. Tucker, is there a way that we can limit the number of cows within the powers of the council?
No, not within any particular zoning classification.
So we do not have the powers to limit the number of cows?
The
We
only
do not have the
time-
powers to limit the number of chickens?
No, the Board of Adjustment has power to do that, but only within the parameters of the ordinance. And so chickens are listed in RA as a special use, which means that a maximum of 6 chickens, no roosters, are permitted per 1 acre lot. Additional fowl may be allowed for lots greater than 1 acre upon approval from the Board of Adjustment. So they have the ability to grant larger, not smaller, because the ordinance sets a minimum.
Thank you.
And so whenever there is a zoning change, it follows the land, not the owner. So if it's zoned RA, then if it's sold, it's still zoned RA, and they can have 2 cows per acre. If there is a request for special exception for the chickens, then that would follow the property as well.
But there's no legal recourse we have to say fewer.
Correct.
So I'm to understand that there really is no cause that we have to even force a compromise. You say yes?
The only other compromise is the buffer, but to limit the number of cows without changing because what you're talking about is the authority to pass this particular zoning ordinance, which is in the zoning code. Now, you can modify that, but to make a limitation on any particular one parcel of property, you can't do.
We can modify what, for clarity?
You can modify the entire zoning code.
The entire
So
zoning
if you want to limit, for example, you've got in RA 2 cows, if you want to make that 1 cow. If you want to make cows by special exception, based on the number as approved by the Board of Adjustment, you can do that. But as it is currently written, it's 2 cows per 1 acre if you're RA, and up to 6 chickens, unless you go to the Board of Adjustment with more, after a special exception has been granted.
Ladies, while you're at the microphone, any comments or opinions about the proposed buffer?
I do. If my math is correct, 100 feet is going to be 33 yards from our fence. That's not even half of a football field. My kids play sports. That's the only thing I could compare it to. So, I mean, you're not talking that's that far away. You're going to be 33 feet away from the properties in the Woodlands.
But then we also go back to the who's enforcing that. You know, we've already had people in the neighborhood contact the city and say, you know, there are roosters out there, there's these ordinance being violated. And so it's who's going to go out there, you know, with a tape measure, you know, and say, oh, you're violating the 100-foot. You know, I don't know. I feel like there has to be a way to enforce it, whether it be they're owning the land or somebody else owning the land. Or it just opens it up to anyone being able to put as many as they want and then go to the Board of Adjustments and potentially add even more.
Ladies, thank you. You've answered my questions.
Thank you.
If the council does not have any questions for those who spoke, I'm going to be prepared to close the public hearing. We will now close the public hearing and take comments from the council. Comments from the council.
Mr. Member, I recognize.
Yes, Mr. Vane.
I just wish that it could have came to an agreement between the neighbors, because y'all all seem nice, really. The McCullens, the neighbors, I don't know all y'all, but y'all all seem nice. And I'm zoned myself, RA, and I have cattle, and I have neighbors. And like I said, my neighbors, they feed my cattle. You know, they just come up to them and take the feed and just put it right in their mouth. And I won't say this, and I'll be quiet, but before that land became city, it was county, and it was farmland. And I grew up in the city, and back then, in my days when I grew up as a young boy, I'm glad I did. All I had to do was go outside and get a chicken, grab it, wring its neck, and take it to mama, and it does the best chicken. The eggs, that was my job, to get the eggs out from underneath the hen. Those eggs are so much better than yolk, if you look at it. And that's even my own kids. They don't, I have 4, and they're grown now. They have no idea. When I go to load my cows, they're scared of them. They don't have that perception of how food is raised, and which kids should know. But I just wish we could have came to an agreement. And Mr. McCullen, you have a lovely place. The neighbors, y'all all have lovely places. And I know y'all still gonna be neighbors, whether we vote yes or no. And y'all all gonna get along. But I just wish it could have been some kind of compromise. But I understand what you're saying about you got 2 cows per acre, and you got 26 cows altogether you can put out there. But one thing I'm gonna say, one thing I'd like to say, please check on the water situation and check on that grass, what I'm telling you about. Because you in the city limits, that grass should not be that high beside y'all's homes. I'll turn the floor back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Van. Mr. Tucker, my last question will probably be, in terms of changing the entire use for RA, when we get to that point, which we will not be there tonight, but when we do get to that point, theoretically, would it be possible to say number of cows adjacent to residential property?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we can craft it at that time any way we like.
Yes.
When it's time to have that conversation with
Yes.
the council. Thank you.
But as for tonight, you're stuck with
That's right.
what has been adopted.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to.
Ms. Stout?
I would like to make a motion to deny the rezoning request.
We have a motion to deny the rezoning request. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to deny the zoning request. Do we have any further conversation from this body?
If I could be recognized.
You may, Mr. Reynolds.
I live in a very similar property to this, agriculture property, residential inside the city limits. I'm surrounded by a farm. Everywhere around me are cattle. I probably have 4 people a week walk up to my house, which I absolutely cannot stand, knock on the door and ask if I would sell my house or if I will sell things at my house. We live in an extremely rural community. I would hate to see the homeowners be told that they can't have any agricultural stuff. I would hate to see the owners of the Woodlands not get what we're in a very difficult position here, and it's unfortunate that we can't work out a compromise. And it would be nice if we could address some of the zoning stuff. It sounds like the family's willing to do, it seems like a lot of concessions, and I can see emotions on both sides. I understand the homeowners and I am in real estate, I am in development, I understand property values, and I definitely understand fear of that. I will point out, though, that we're in an extremely rural community in a small town where those things actually, in most cases, are more of a bonus and a detriment from prices. But, you know, there's a lot of things, for instance, you know, the flooding of the entrance. Whatever washes off of their property onto that business is far outweighed by the drama coming down Cootie Creek. So, you know, if you're worried about chicken or cow manure coming onto your property in that area, I think you should be much more concerned about the creek. But it seems that they've met all the requirements for the existing zoning, and it seems like they've made some emotional discussions up here. As a homeowner, if you were telling me I couldn't do what I wanted to do on my land, I'd move here from somewhere else, and you were saying no, 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 my first reaction would be to be a little emotional and be argumentative. And I'm sure that I would say some things that I would regret later. I think there's emotions on both sides. I think that in talking to the homeowners, they've got some really great things they want to do. They watch podcasts. They're watching particular people online where they're learning. They don't really know a lot about what they're doing. A lot of times they're not saying the right words. They're not saying the right things that they want to put it. And listening to everyone's discussion, they're saying the wrong word for a cow. They're going to kill us. They're going to slaughter cows and not steers. You butcher steers. And just because they don't know the proper terminology and things doesn't mean that they have a bad intention. And it seems like there's room in here for the homeowners and your property owners to get to some kind of something. I almost hate to vote on it tonight because I think that we might make a wrong vote. And it seems like there's a way that it sure seems like everyone can get up and leave this table happy about this situation. And it takes a little confidence and a little trust on both sides. I totally am nervous of if we change the zoning, it goes to everyone else and then you can do what you want. I'm really not comfortable with that 100%. I'm not comfortable with, it's just really awkward. We live in a really rural community where you start saying you can't have cows and chickens and things like that. I'm 100% against the 80 to 100-year efforts of the grocery and the lawn industry to make us all think we've got to mow our lawn and spray fertilizer on it, put all this crap on our lawns that aren't good for our house, good for our kids, good for our animals. They're trying to tell us all this stuff that's not good for us. We're not teaching proper agriculture in school. We're not teaching proper farming procedures in our school. We should have way less lawn and bushes at our house and a lot more gardening and a lot more animals and chickens and things like that, even inside the city limits. And I think we're missing a lot of that opportunity. I wish there was a way we could compromise in something tonight. With that, I will yield the floor back.
Mr. Tucker, we already have a motion and a second. If we were to modify the zoning at some point, how much time would that take to happen? So if we were to, at some point, offer a suggestion to modify it to say something similar to what I said in my example, how long would that take?
Oh, probably less than a month. And I say that because any zoning change has to go through the Planning Commission first, and then moving through Public Works and then City Council. So that's 2 weeks at least, and then time to draft it and get the meeting called.
And the reason why I asked that, to Councilor Reynolds' point, I do think that we need to relook at that as soon as possible so that we have things built in place where a meaningful compromise can happen. As it stands now, there are none. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Phibbs?
Are you saying could we postpone this and try to do this within a month and then come back to this item?
No, I'm saying that, on your question, let me ask Mr. Tucker. If we did a change to it, would it be retroactive?
If you were to, meaning to assume
If we said 2 cows.
applications that had already been processed, I mean, it wouldn't be retroactive because you would be voting on, unless you're saying deny this and then.
We'd be voting on it going forward. In other words, you're saying.
It depends on what it is. So, for example, if you wanted to pass an ordinance which allowed urban chickens, then that would apply to whatever zoning classifications you enacted. Could be RA, could be R1, whatever. And in that case, it would apply to all zoning classifications. And so it wouldn't need to be retroactive, because it would be from the time you approved it. Am I understanding your question, or?
You are.
Okay, okay.
You are. Councilor Hibbs, I'm not saying yes or no. What are you suggesting?
Well, there's so much confusion tonight, that's the reason I asked if that's what you was recommending.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I'm dependent on my peers tonight because we've had this conversation for several weeks. But I'm open to whatever we need to do to get to wherever we need to get.
Roy, would it be
Go ahead,
proper
ma'am.
to ask the parties if they would be willing to do this?
Specifically, when you say this, what are you meaning?
If we went with the ruling of move the rules out before we voted on it?
Amending the ordinance? It would be fine to ask that. We're talking some significant procedural hurdles that we've got to get through first. Approval from a recommendation from the Planning Commission. First, it's got to be drafted, and we've got to have guidance from you all as to what you want changed. And then we've got to put that in front of Planning Commission. Hopefully, they'll pass it or make a recommendation on the first try, then get it to the council. Hopefully, that'll get recommendation on the front try. So when I say less than a month, that's assuming everybody agrees on everything, and that's maybe overconfident unless we get some good direction, and it's, to allow chickens within, limit the number of chickens within an RA classification. Then you're going to have folks who are grandfathered in who already have an RA classification, who already have a special exception. So there are a number of things to be looked at to make sure that whatever you all do is, in fact, what you're intending to do.
I think if Ms. Hibbs's question and this conversation would have been had in advance of this zoning requirement zoning request being made, we would be in a better situation in terms of having said, and I'm talking out of pure example, if we had an abutting residential area next to a area that was going to be that would request to be reclassified to RA, as is the case on tonight, that because you're next to a residential area, you can only have this number of this or that. And I think to Ms. Hibbs's point, I don't want to belabor the time too much, but I would not mind a brief thought from the opposers that if the existing rules were more restrictive, would that be okay? Of course, that opinion is going to be bigger than what's in the room tonight once we go down that path. So, Ms. Garner, Ms. Richter, Ms. Neighbors, Mr. Garner, Ms. Richter, Ms. Neighbors, Ms. Ocean, any of those who have been. And again, I just want your thoughts.
Right. My understanding, Mr. Tucker, am I correct that if this is denied tonight, he can reapply in 6 months? So that would give the council sufficient time to come up with new regulations. If it was denied, he does have the ability to reapply in 6 months.
Does he have to wait the full 6 months?
Per the ordinance, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Tucker, I have a question. If he pulled his request, would he have to wait the 6 months?
No, it's after it's been acted on by the council.
When would he pull his request?
He could do it immediately.
Thank you, ladies. Ms. McClellan, come to the microphone, please. I want to be certain you understand what we're. I want to be sure you understand what we're attempting to do.
Yes, I understand. And I got no problem with it. You know, I mean, so if what you're saying is that you want to take a month to work it through the process and come up with some ideas of what we can and cannot do on the property according to RA, I don't have a problem with that, you know. So if you guys vote tonight, we can't mess with it for another 6 months.
We
But
can withdraw our seconds and motions.
right.
You,
Yeah.
you
we'll-
pull it, you can resubmit it.
Right.
You don't have to wait 6 months.
Yeah, okay, we'll pull it.
And we won't take 6 months to do what we need to do.
Gotcha.
Because we will probably, probably this week we've got cleanup this week, Azalea cleanup. But next week, take up this matter in our communication lunches to look at what those options would look like.
Sure.
And that's the best I can offer in terms of trying to get to a compromise. Mr. Hazelton?
Isn't there a provision in the ordinance that the 6 months can be waived if there's been a substantial change? And when the zoning changes to the zoning ordinance be considered a substantial change? Substantial enough to waive the 6-month fee if they were to go ahead and make a motion this evening?
Are you looking at a particular section, or is this a test? Let me double check that. That was not my recollection, but I will double check.
But what I will be encouraging tonight, if it's the will of this body, is that we withdraw that motion in a second in exchange for allowing Mr. McClellan to withdraw his application so that we can see what we can do to find something that's better. Because I think it's time for us to look at that not just for the Woodlands area, but for how we go forward as a city.
Right.
Because other requests will come, and we have to be careful as a council that our decisions are contiguous with past practice and that future practice makes sense for everybody involved.
Yes, sir.
Can I implore my members to withdraw their motion in a second?
I do, one question. What would the current ordinance for the current chickens he does have?
It would remain as, Mr. Tucker?
I'm sorry. You have to ask your question. I was trying to look up.
With him currently having the chickens on the property now, how would that affect what ordinance would that fall in since we haven't approved this?
Then it's effectively R1, and they would be prohibited.
What do we want to do while we're doing our work? Mr. Tucker, what is allowable?
You could suspend enforcement, but you can't do it for one property. It has to be citywide. At which point the prohibition on, it's widely ill-advised, but you have the right to do it. You could suspend enforcement of the agricultural rule, but it would have to be for the entire city. That's why I say it's ill-advised.
Yeah, we will not do that. I don't think we would.
Can I make some comments at this point?
Mr. Reed?
I've been trying to sit on my hands, but here I go. All right, so, this council, we have put this off for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And here we are again trying to find a way to put this off. There is no compromise that's going to work with everybody. We have rules in place that we said that there is no agriculture. And so one thing that sticks out with me with what Mr. McClellan said is that, we'll probably get on up the road, if we continue to have this happen to us. So there is a possibility that this property may be sold one day. And once this property is sold, the zoning stays with this property. Good man, good family says 2 today, but the next family may say, I'm going to bring all my cattle in 2 per acre, so forth and so on. So what we are responsible for doing tonight is dealing with tonight. I'm not willing to withdraw my motion because we have to deal with a problem. We've kicked the can down the road long enough. And, unfortunately, let's vote on it. Let's deal with it. This neighborhood is today. Tomorrow it may be another neighborhood. The public is watching and seeing what we're doing. So we're going to have more coming up, wanting to have the success story that Ivory Van talked about as a kid. I remember the Beardens. They came to us, came before us with the same dream that they wanted for their kids, and we denied them. And then tonight, we sitting up here trying to figure out a way to make it work for another neighborhood. The neighborhoods are watching this council. They're listening to this council. And so, you know, I'm sorry, that's just where I'm at.
We have a standing motion and second to deny. Am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, I'll be recognized.
Yes, Mr. Van.
You know, as a kid, this wasn't a motion. I mean, it wasn't a dream. This was a reality. This is how, as a kid, back when I grew up in the 60s, that's how poor people survived, was having goats in the yard, hogs in the pen, stuff like this. So this was reality, and I understand what Deputy Mayor is saying, but this is how I grew up, and I'm telling you, by me having cattle myself, just seeing them calves turn into, bulls turn into steers, and me taking them to the slaughterhouse, it's nothing that tastes no better than that meat. When you go to the store, it's no comparison. But I'm just saying, I really just hate this. We're in this situation like we are tonight, but like you say, we got to vote. We definitely got to vote. And ever how it comes out, it just has to come out. But I'm just so thankful I grew up the way I grew up. And that was kind of like in the country. Well, I learned something. I can survive right now. Because with the war and stuff going on, we never know what we're going to have to go back to. Because it pays to know how to make a garden. It pays to know how to raise hogs. It pays to know how to raise chicken. It pays to know how to raise cows. I'll turn the floor back to you, Mayor, and I'm through.
Thank you, Mr. Van. We've had ample discussion.
May I have the floor, Mayor? Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hughes?
Roy, can I get a clarification, please, on, so if this motion goes through and the motion is to deny the request, but say this motion fails and no other motion comes forward, is he still able to pull his request and continue with what we discussed moments ago?
Already pulled it?
Well, you already pulled it, but the motion stands.
No, he didn't pull it.
I don't know. He stood right there and said he pulled it.
He said he would.
So it's
But we're
on
still
the
in-
agenda, it's in front of the council for action.
Yes.
You can grant him permission to pull it, but it's in front of you now.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Would you ask your question again, Dr. Hughes? I apologize.
So if if this motion fails, the motion, and then he's still able to come up and it would be granted to pull his application.
If nobody made another motion and the denial failed, then you all didn't take final action. What the provision says is a petition to change a district and regulations once heard and decided upon shall not be considered again until a period of 6 months has elapsed.
And I agree also with Deputy Mayor Reed. I mean, we've kicked this down, but I think that we also need to be very methodical. I mean, there are some opportunities to sit there, and it comes up at a special call where we're able to put rules on certain things with these. So, I mean, if he comes up, he says 2 cows, everyone agrees 2 cows, it has to be 2 cows. He can't do more than 2 cows. Cows, whatever the term is, Alex, you said it. So I'm going to vote against the motion, and with hopes that he would pull his application and we can move forward as we discussed, because I think that's the best we can move forward.
So explain the vote, Roy. A yes is?
A yes is to deny.
Is the council clear?
And so what you're saying, though, is he can come back before the 6 months, is what you're trying to?
So if we say no, and then no one makes a motion, he can come up and we can grant him permission to pull his application. And that gives us the time to do what we discussed before, because I agree with kind of how that process is leaning right now.
So, Mr. Tucker, Mr. McClellan may withdraw his application regardless of the outcome of this vote.
Providing nobody makes another motion to grant it and it's approved. Yes.
Is the council clear? We have a motion and a second to deny. Roll call.
Tracy Hughes?
No.
Tracy McGee?
No.
Stephanie Morgan,
Yes.
Alex Reynolds,
No.
Evelyn Hibbs,
No.
Jamie Stout,
Yes.
Ivory Van,
No.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed,
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
No.
You have 6 noes.
We have 6 no's. So the motion to deny
Failed.
fails. Do we have an alternate motion, or do we need an alternate motion? What are we doing?
You can ask for an alternate motion.
We'd like to entertain an alternate motion.
To make a motion, grant permission for him to withdraw his application, or does he need a motion to do that?
That's good. That'll work.
Second.
Yeah, you have to have a specific action with 5 votes. It's not a by virtue of no vote.
We have a motion and a second to allow Mr. McClellan to withdraw. Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, the motion passes. Item number, where are we? 2.
Consider approval of ordinance number 4159A, amending the City of Muskogee Code of Ordinances by adding Chapter 3, City Council Ethics, Article 2, Ethics, Section 3-8, General Policy, Section 3-9, Conflict of Interest, Section 3-10, Use and Disclosure of Information Prohibited, Section 3-11, Use of Cellular Phones and Recording Devices Prohibited, Section 3-12, Positive Workplace Environment, Section 3-13, Ethics Advisory Committee, Creation and Structure, Section 3-14, Participation in Ethics Investigations, Section 3-15, Violation, adding repealer, severability, codification, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tucker.
Mayor, members of the council, this is a repeat from the proposed ordinance that was brought forth to you last week. This is proposed ordinance 4159A. And so the history of this ordinance is that the City Council is currently performing under City Council Policy 1-10, which was adopted on January 24th, 2017. Recently, on February 14th, the City Council approved action to direct staff to revise the existing policy to include censorship, penalties, and possible removal from City Council for behavior that puts credibility of the City Council at risk. So what we have done is attempt to follow that direction that was given to the council, and so we prepared the ordinance that is in front of you, and so I'll go through each one of these sections again. There were some cleanup, language cleanups that we did from last time, and so those are going to be highlighted in red as we go through this PowerPoint. So Section 3.8, which is the first section, requires respect and adherence to the City Council form of government as outlined by the Charter, for the purpose, of course, for not interfering with the city manager's staff. That is, of course, a prohibition that is within the Charter and has been incorporated into this Code of Ethics. Additionally, Section 3.8 requires councils to present the official policies of the city, and if presenting a contrary opinion to what the council has decided, to specifically state that it is their own opinion and not the opinion of the City Council. Section 3.8 also requires that City Council members comply with all laws, including campaign finance, financial disclosures, city ordinances, and to not use their position to influence decisions in which they have a financial interest. The next section, 3-8, requires independence and impartiality in decision-making and not using a council member's official position to advance positions in which the councilor may have a material, financial interest, organizational responsibility, or personal relationship which would give the appearance of a conflict of interest. This section specifically requires disclosure of 901 of the city charter, which requires investments to be, is the financial disclosure requirement. We're proposing disclosing investments, interest in real property, sources of income, and gifts. That also requiring abstention for participation in decision making where conflict exists. This section would also prohibit undue influence of individual members of the community or a council member's own self-interest. The point of this being that council members should act for the betterment of the entire community, of course. Section 3-10 prohibits disclosure or offering to disclose information that is not available to the general public that members have garnered from their position, particularly with regard to confidential information concerning property, personnel, or the affairs of the city. Additionally, this prohibits using confidential information to advance personal, financial, or other private interests. And similar to the existing Council Policy 1-10, does require a confidentiality agreement each time the Council convenes an executive session. That's always a general reminder to everyone that things that are discussed in executive session should remain confidential. Section 3-11 is a new section that is not within existing the policy 1-10, and it would require council members to leave their cell phones or any recording devices with the officer on duty, the police officer on duty, unless and except any emergency or medical personnel who need to be able to receive telephone calls. Now, that provision is specifically germane to executive sessions, and so that helps keep the sanctity of executive sessions. Section 3-12 requires counselors to support the maintenance of a positive and constructive workplace and for business dealings, requires professional and personal conduct to be above reproach and avoid even the appearance of impropriety. It does require members to refrain from abusive conduct, personal charges, or verbal attacks upon the character and motives of other members, boards and commissions, the staff, and public. And that is a direct copy from the same language in 1-10. Additionally, it requires council maintain the rules of decorum, which is an existing ordinance that we've got, and also requires members to be prepared to refrain from interrupting other members, making personal comments not germane to the business of the body. Section 3-12 also requires members who obtain information to publicly share it with their colleagues so that everybody has all of the information that is available and so that the council can make the best decision possible. Section 3-13 is a completely new provision. It does establish the Ethics Advisory Committee. That committee would be comprised of 5 individuals, none of whom may be a city council member or related to them. We have proposed the following: 1 local business owner, a high school or college teacher, a religious leader, a manufacturer or maintenance worker, and an attorney. Of that committee, and this is some cleanup language, we did create the position of chair and vice chair. Obviously, we need someone to run the meeting and move the agenda items forward. We propose a term of 3 years, and the Ethics Advisory, any council member, department head or division head, trustee, members of a board or authority or committee may request an advisory opinion from the Ethics Advisory Committee. The Ethics Committee shall provide a yearly report to the council on all of its activities. They shall meet at least quarterly unless there's a written complaint that has been given to them, in which case they shall meet within 10 days of the filing of that complaint, and they shall then issue their advisory opinion and recommendation within 30 days. Now, the Ethics Committee, just to be very clear, is nothing but an advisory committee. They have no independent power other than to make recommendations to the City Council, because under the Charter 2-07, the Council is the sole judge of the qualifications of its members. A new section that we did add after our first discussion was a provision that would allow the Ethics Committee to adopt reasonable rules and procedures for the efficient performance of their duties, and of course those would be subject to council approval, meaning if they did want to create hearing procedures or procedures for their meetings, effectively their own bylaws, they could do that with your approval. So you would have the ability to review those and in moving forward. Section 3-14 states that violations of the ethics policy can be up to removal of office under City Charter 207, and that can include everything in between, such as censure, loss of seniority, committee assignment, etc. When there is questionable ethical conduct, a complaint can be filed with the city clerk. The city clerk will then forward the complaint to the Ethics Advisory Committee, which will trigger the 10 days in order to hold a hearing, and then have a recommendation within 30. A verbal complaint amongst any of those organizations who are able to file one can contact me and articulate that. Whatever their complaint is, I will write down the pertinent facts and I will file it with the city clerk on behalf of the complaining party. Now, if when the Ethics Commission investigates, they determine that a violation has occurred, then that item will automatically be placed on the next council meeting for council determination. And then when the council considers that, they will determine whether to trigger Section 207 of the city charter. Now, Section 207 of the city charter is when the council makes a determination that an official's conduct constitutes grounds for forfeiture of office and approves a statement of charges on the council member, allowing him or her to be entitled to a public hearing, in which case the council will sit as the jury and make the determination if the conduct has resulted in forfeiture of office. And in those actions, there's a court reporter to articulate all of the testimony, and the municipal judge presides as the law officer. And so that is all contained within Section 207 of the city charter. Section 315, sorry, I was a little behind there. The next section, which is a completely new section, is a similar adoption of State Ethics Rule 6.4, and that would not allow the Ethics Advisory Committee to accept a complaint alleging campaign finance during an election. Now, a campaign finance violation could be alleged, just not during that time, meaning if a council member who was sitting on council failed to comply with the state rules on campaign finance, the conduct that they have allegedly perpetrated would still be wrong. It would just be investigated and a finding made following the election itself. And this is the same rule that the state follows, the State Ethics Commission follows whenever they receive those complaints with their office. They won't accept them until after the election, has occurred. And so the reason this was moved forward to tonight on special call was so that it could be revised to include an emergency. That is what is in front of you tonight for action. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that concludes the PowerPoint.
Just before we go into any questions from Mr. Tucker, we have two residents signed up to speak to us tonight. Mr. Pete Caraway, if you'll come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, you'll have 5 minutes.
My name's Pete Caraway, 118 Golf Lane. I have two questions. Under the current charter, as written, does the council have the authority to remove members of the council in violation of rules that they have already existing? In other words, I'm saying that the current charter allows the council to make rules and decide what rules of conduct, ethic or otherwise, could cause a removal from office. And also the charter says, and that are well protected, that the vote has to be 6 out of 8. Councils have to agree that the action is warranted to expel or discipline a current council member. And I could, with my limited
Mr. Caraway
experience, I ask your advice on that. Because I do object to that. Also, I object to the vision of an advisory ethics board. This is a political body.
Mr. Caraway, let me interrupt you. I'm simply presenting.
I know.
You need to address the council.
Speak to the microphone. But I'll leave that as an open question. It is my opinion you have the authority or can write rules of conduct of the council because you are a political body not subject to government control by either judiciary or the President of the United States, for that matter. The President of the United States cannot enter the halls of Congress without being invited. The impeachment of the President is a political process, not a judicial process. If you watched the impeachment, you saw that the rules of evidence and testimony does not reflect what happens in the average courthouse, whether it be in Muskogee or anywhere else. It is a political decision, not subject to the whims of the city manager or anybody else. They represent the people. The people elected their representatives. And if they don't like what's going on in the city council, then you're not going to be members very long when you come up for re-election. You do not nullify the political election by some type of administrative rule by some other than a political body. If you guys go crazy, I dare say that the governor could declare a state of emergency and put you out of business and change your charter because he's the ones that let you have it to start with. So I advise plenty of caution because what goes around come around. For instance, if Mr. Coleman, and this happened a while back, I don't know whether he's representing his district as well as being the mayor. Does that make a difference? Yes. Why? If he is removed as a council member, then he can't perform his duties as the mayor. His only sole function of any of import is to chair the city council. If he can't sit on the city council, he can't be the mayor. That is my opinion. And I think we should be very careful as a group when we admonish or when we censure somebody that we remove from the board, the city council, that was elected in a fair election. Not aware of it, it came to mind that the Speaker of the House is in control of the police of the grounds upon which the Congress resides. Nobody else on this God-green earth has jurisdiction on what happens within the halls of Congress or on its property.
Mr. Caraway, your time is up. I want to thank you. I will
I'm
ask.
serious.
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Caraway?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does the council have any questions for Mr. Caraway? Thank you, Mr. Caraway. The next person that was assigned to speak up tonight is Mark Hughes. I ask you to come to your microphone, give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Well, I'm not sure, but I'm almost certain that if the city votes to approve the current...
What's your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mark Hughes, 907 Nelson Drive.
Thank you.
I'm not certain, but I think I am, that if the city council votes to approve the code of ethics as it is tonight, they'll be voting an illegal ordinance in. And the reason why I say that is because you're declaring an emergency. And City Ordinance 2-14 says emergency ordinances. An emergency ordinance is an ordinance which, in the judgment of the council, is necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, or safety. So I don't think the Code of Ethics has anything to do with the preservation of the public peace, health, or safety, unless someone can convince me otherwise. And then, unfortunately, in my research, the city council has a propensity to use or declare an emergency whenever they want something to automatically take effect instead of waiting 30 days. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to monitor what you all are doing, because it's obviously that somebody has overlooked this intentionally or otherwise, and just because you want something to take effect immediately doesn't mean you can violate your own ordinance to do so. So from now on, I'm going to start watching you guys and making sure that you comply with the emergency ordinance, and you don't declare an ordinance an emergency just because you want it to be emergency. It has to be a public health or safety issue or a welfare issue. And I appreciate if the city council would start looking at these ordinances. Anytime you declare an emergency, you have to ask the question, why? Why is an emergency of a city code of ethics? Just because one or two people want it published immediately does not make it an emergency. You know, the city has to comply with their own ordinances as if anything, to show the people of Muskogee that we follow the same rules that you guys force us to follow through passing the ordinance and getting them, implemented by the police department. So your job as a city council is to protect constituents like us and make sure that you comply with the same city ordinances that we have to comply with. So I'd appreciate it if you all would, pay attention to the use of these emergency ordinances and should only use it when it actually has to do with public health and welfare and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hughes on tonight? Those are the only two residents that have signed to speak up tonight. What is the pleasure of the council?
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor. Roy, if you would go here with me, section 312. Can you give more clarity, number B, which you're taking from the ethics that's already in place, 110? And could you give us some clarity on what we say, members shall refrain from abusive conduct? Can you be more clear on that? A lot of this is just wide ranged and need to be narrowed down or specific. So could you be specific in that so one would know what violations they have done?
Well, my interpretation here tonight is not going to be binding on the Ethics Commission, who is going to be looking at these and making a recommendation. Because ultimately it's going to decide, it's going to be the council's decision whether any of these rules have violated yet. But what I would say, kind of going back to yours and my conversation, Councilor McGee, is, personal charges, for example, would be making a false allegation that some council member has been taking bribes, for example. That'd be a personal charge. Now, if they have, of course, that's not a personal charge. But if it's an allegation that the person who speaks knows it to be false, would be a personal charge. Things like abusive conduct. That would be behavior that is, for lack of a better term, getting in a council member's face in the meeting, screaming at them. That would violate our rules of decorum anyway. Something like verbal attacks. That would be calling out a member using derogatory terms that in no way relate to something that they have voted on or done like that. Because the council can be critical of itself. You can be critical of how your other members vote and how they behave. If somebody voted yes and in your opinion should have voted no, that's part of the deliberative process. That's perfectly fine. But taking those to a more personal and abusive and attackish area, calling someone names would potentially, I'm not saying it would, because again, you're talking about hypotheticals and we can only look at specific information, potentially be.
Yeah, that's my point. I'm trying to get to specific info, because this is so broad, and so I'm trying to identify how do you narrow it down to be specific. Another question I have, well, what is ethics in the arena of municipality government? And then what is a violation? Because if you say abusive conduct, you're saying that the council is the one that has to bring these charges or say that you did blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it should be, I think it should be something that would be an indicator that you can't do dot, 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 dot. Abusive conduct is broad. How do you narrow that down and be specific? Because I may think one thing and somebody else could think another. So that's why I'm saying, if it's possible for this to be narrowed down or at least specified what the charge is or what the violation is.
So to answer that, that's why there is a committee proposed of 5 individuals to look at what has been alleged to make that determination. They then recommend to the council whether they think, in their opinion, that it constitutes a violation.
So once the committee is formed, then we'll know some more in depth as to.
No.
No. Okay.
No. They will, so let's say somebody files a complaint because, during a meeting, Counselor Hibbs got in City Clerk Tracy's face and began screaming profanities at her in the middle of a meeting. And so the mayor wanted to file a ethics complaint against Ms. Hibbs for doing that. And I use that example because I realize neither of those things would ever happen. And so the Ethics Commission would review that and determine, did that conduct rise to the level of abusive conduct, personal charges, or verbal attacks? And if so, looking at all the findings, do they recommend that Ms. Hibbs violated that provision of the ethics policy? Let's say they vote yes, that she did violate that by her conduct involving City Clerk Tammy Tracy. Then that would be forwarded to the City Council, and the council would determine, based on the recommendation, which the council can fully reject or can adopt, and then decide if formal charges should be laid against Counselor Hibbs for her conduct.
Okay, I get that part, but I guess maybe I'm missing that. There's no definitions specific. Everything we got here is broad. And so in a broad scope of thing, it can be almost anything, is what I'm saying. So someone can say, example I had, same-sex marriages. Would that be a violation? Would that be an ethic issue? Can one warrant that? Because it's so vague, you know what I'm saying? It's so broad that anyone can bring up anything. It's not narrowed down. It's not given any specific or definitions. What you follow?
I don't follow, because that's just a term, and you haven't applied it to anyone. So a term would need to apply to someone to be a personal attack or a personal charge.
So you're saying it has to be, you're saying that it has to be under the abusive conduct, or personal charge, or verbal attack?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just these 3 windows. Okay.
So when you say same-sex marriage, that doesn't, it's sort of an abstract comment because it's not applicable to any one member of the council.
Okay.
That's the part of your question I was not clear on.
Okay. So can you define ethics for me here? What are we saying there?
The expected conduct of members of the council.
Okay, so you just saying conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are rules that purportedly you all would enforce upon yourselves because you all would adopt them, you all enforce them as the council.
Okay. Is it unethical to challenge anyone in a city race?
No.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but again, that would be up to the. I can't imagine a scenario where it would be.
Okay. Well, you see where I'm going with it, right? Because if I ask you that, and you said, is it unethical to challenge a city race? Maybe, maybe not.
No, it wouldn't.
Depending on if the committee or someone up here says, I want to say that's an ethic violation, and then they take it to the committee, and the committee go through the steps.
Let's say that happened, then the committee would look, is there anything that prohibits it? There's not. There's nothing in these ethical rules, there's nothing in our charter that would prohibit someone, so by its nature, it couldn't be a violation of the ethics policy.
Okay, and what is intentional violation? What does that mean?
means a violation that was knowingly made, not inadvertent or accidental.
You intentionally did it?
Yeah, so you knew the rules and you violated them anyway.
Okay.
Is a
And so
good
my
way to say
question
it.
is, what is the rules? That's where I'm going.
All of those that I just went through.
Okay. That's broad, it's still broad in my perspective. Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Thank you, Ms.
That's all I
McGee.
had, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
ma'am. Thank you. Any other questions for the council? What is your pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on this item. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
No.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds.
Yes.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout. Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, the item passes. We'll now entertain a motion to declare an emergency.
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second to declare an emergency. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Tracy Hous. Tracy McGee.
No.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds. Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, the item passes. We have no other citizens signed to speak to us tonight, so we will go to item number 3.
Consider an executive session to discuss and take possible action on the following. A, pursuant to Section 307B4, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss 4 lawsuits styled England versus City of Muskogee, case number CV 2007-20, Lacey versus City of Muskogee, case number CV 2007-1377, Taft versus City of Muskogee, case number CJ 2007-1410, Vaughn versus City of Muskogee, case number CJ 2007-1371, filed in the District Court in and for Muskogee County, Oklahoma, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session. B, pursuant to Section 307B4, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss a pending claim or action by KW Premier Properties, LLC, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session. C, pursuant to Section 307B1, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss the employment and evaluate the performance of City Manager Mike Miller, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session. D, pursuant to Section 307B1, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss the employment and evaluate the performance of City Attorney Roy D. Tucker, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session. E, pursuant to Section 307B1, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss the employment and evaluate the performance of City Clerk Tammy L. Tracy, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session. F, pursuant to Section 307B1, Title 25 Oklahoma statutes, consider convening an executive session to discuss the employment and evaluate the performance of Municipal Judge Tony Bradley Smith, and if necessary, take appropriate action in open session.
Mr. Tucker, before I entertain a motion to go into executive session in light of the new rules requiring the restriction of cell phones, I'm going to
Let me be clear. With an emergency, they only go into effect upon publication.
Okay.
So, since this ordinance hasn't been published, it's not in effect yet.
Okay.
So just.
That's
Now,
fine. I
so
was gonna
people been
motion to give people 5 minutes to go through their phones and do whatever they needed to do.
Okay.
And then return back to session in 5 minutes.
You could do that. You don't need to do a motion. I would just, because we're already in executive session.
Does that make sense?
You can't make a motion to do that.
So, just
just-
a 5-minute recess?
We haven't made a motion.
We haven't made a motion to go into executive
Oh, I'm
session.
sorry. I thought we did.
No.
Move for second.
Sorry.
We waiting to see what the motion should be. Is that,
You want to recess for a period of 5 minutes?
and then return to executive session? That's the motion. We clear?
If that's what you want, 5 minutes or
Yes.
10?
5, 10. 5 is fine.
Okay.
Motion and a second?
Yes.
Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds. Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Derek Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, we will recess for 5 minutes and then return to be able to convene into executive session.
Okay.
These auditors, not technically, but
We will now reconvene from recess. Roll call.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Jared Reed.
Here.
Ivory Van.
Here.
Jamie Stout.
Here.
Evelyn Hibbs. Alex Reynolds. Stephanie Morgan.
Here.
Tracy McGee.
Here.
Tracy Hous.
We'll now entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Move for approval. Second.
Roll call.
Tracy Hous.
Yes.
Tracy McGee.
Yes.
Stephanie Morgan.
Yes.
Alex Reynolds. Evelyn Hibbs.
Yes.
Jamie Stout.
Yes.
Ivory Van.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jared Reed.
Yes.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Yes, we will now go into executive session. We will now reconvene from executive session. Roll call.
Mayor Marlon Coleman.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Jared Reed.
Here.
Ivory Van.
Here.
Jamie Stout.
Here.
Evelyn Hibbs.
Here.
Alex Reynolds. Here. Stephanie Morgan.
Here.
Tracy McGee.
Here.
Tracy Hous.
Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 3A, pursuant to Section 307B4, Title 25, Oklahoma statutes, the council did convene an executive session to discuss the four lawsuits styled England versus City of Muskogee, Lacey versus City of Muskogee, Taft versus City of Muskogee, and Vaughn versus City of Muskogee. After being briefed on the status of those cases, no action is necessary at this time. Item 3B, pursuant to Section 307B4, Title 25, Oklahoma statutes, the City Council did convene an executive session to discuss a pending claim or action by KW Premier Properties, LLC. After discussing the same with the City Attorney and giving him necessary direction, no other action is necessary at this time. Items C through F, the council did not discuss an executive session and no action is taken. Those will be addressed at a later time. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Those were our last items for tonight. We are adjourned.